So I always like to start with brows. So next I'm going to start on the eyes before we do any skin. I always start with lining on the inside of the eye, so the inner rim, tight lining. This is a beautiful brown color. It's called the perfect brown. It's a perfect earthy brown. Once the eyes are done and you find, you get a nice shape, you'll find that you actually can go quite softer on the complexion, because face starts to look a little bit more made up with the brow, with the eyes. It starts to become more enhanced, and then it helps you to sort of edit yourself so that you're not using as much complexion products. This will also help to make the lashes look thicker. Then at this point, you can also start to shape the eye. So now I can go a little bit above, line into the roots of the lashes on the outer center, because she has no complexion on now, so it'll be very easy to clean it off with a Q-tip, shape it. You can also test different shapes. So I'm flipping the pencil over now, and I'm going to just use that brush just to blend in the outer corners. I'm just blending this into the lid. So we'll line the bottom lid as well. I'm gonna go right into that corner there. I like to apply a little bit more into this corner because it really shapes the eye beautifully. And then the tear duct as well in here. It elongates the eye sort of horizontally. It gives it that beautiful almond shape. So I definitely like to get in there with the liner as well. So now that we've done this liner, this also helps you to sort of not use as much eyeshadows, because you're getting the definition now step by step, and so you can go with a softer approach to eyeshadows as well. All right, so I'm gonna move on now to eyeshadow. All right, so we have the Master Mattes Neutrals and Master Mattes Original. I usually go between the two, but I'm definitely gonna start with this one, the original one. I'm gonna take the E3, it's one of my favorites. And because now I've defined her eye with liner, she really doesn't need that much eyeshadow. I'm gonna start out with a little bit of eye powder, the number 1 Fair Pink. And I'm just gonna sweep it onto the lid. I'm gonna take shade 8, my favorite. Maybe mix a little bit of 7, 4. So I'm gonna go just with a softly sculpted lid, definitely focusing on pulling up and out. As I'm going out, I want to soften it, make sure it's not as dark towards the outers. I'm just going to go very lightly across the whole lid. My whole thing is I definitely like to work in light, thin layers for all of the face, including the eyes, because it's just much easier that way. You just take a step back, you do a little bit, take a step back, you gauge, if you need more. But definitely it's always easier to add than it is to remove. And you save on time that way, I think, as well. Another one of my favorites, the E6. It's a double-sided brush. I'm going to take the flat side here and a little bit of shade number 3 mixed with number 2. So I'm going to now take just the highest point of the brow and just press a little bit of this highlight in there. It affects the shape on, depending on where you apply this highlight. So if I take this and I bring it all the way down, this will now bring the eyebrow and the eye down. So that's why I'm keeping it only here, because I want to keep that brown over here. The shape here that I'm working on, as you can see, it's a little, once we clean it, it's gonna really define the shape. But you have the option now, you can really go up, you can go straight across, you can go slightly down. It will completely change the look depending on where you're blending that color. So I'm kind of going on her right now, kind of straight out into the temples. Just gonna take a water wipe and wipe underneath. And then also, I typically will also add liner later. Once we're done, I'll kind of go in and add a little bit more. But we have that part in, and so now I don't have to worry about messing up the complexion by touching and stuff and moving her lid up, and I did that when she had nothing on. Okay, so I'm going to take now this shade here, shade number 6 in the Neutrals palette, just kind of connecting it into the eyebrows. Now this is going to then just later on, it'll connect to the nose here and just really give a nice anchor and a nice shape to the eye. She already has moisturizer on here. I'm just going to wipe it off around the eye, so I'm going to apply a little bit more. I would recommend an oily moisturizer. So that, when you use powder, it really grips onto it beautifully. Actually, I prefer oily skin, because the more oily the skin and the more emollient the moisturizer, the more powder you can use, and it looks more natural, if that makes sense. So if someone has very dry skin, powder doesn't look natural on them. It's like you got to spray it and you have to, But if someone has oily skin and if you're using an emollient moisturizer, the makeup later, when you're done with the makeup, is going to look great, because that oily skin or that emollient moisturizer grabs onto the powder and kind of makes it look part of the skin. Okay, so I'm going to just move on to foundation, concealer, and then we'll go back to the eyes. Okay, so I'm going to use shade 12O, so shade 12 Olive with my little minis here. Shade 12 Olive here. Okay, so I'm going to take the F4 brush. I'm going to take the smaller side. I like to apply with the small side and blend with the large side. This is how I like to apply it, almost like buffing. I like to apply it. I usually start by the nose area, the center of the face, and then as I go out and up, I spread it very thin. So I don't like to have any thick foundation around the perimeter of the face. And so I'm just applying it almost like buffing it, stippling it. And so instead of dragging it, I'm just kind of buffing it in like this, and pressing it with quite a good amount of pressure. Because a lot of people, I think, will put the same amount of foundation across the entire face when you don't really need to do that, because I'm going to apply more product, but just in little areas that it's needed, and the areas that it's not needed, I'm just going with a thin layer. I would say after doing foundation, I like to go in with a combination of loose powder and concealer, but more like kind of putting it into the right over the areas by patting it and then setting it with a little bit of translucent loose powder, and then going over it again with a little bit more of the cream. So it's like this layering of cream and powder, but just on the areas that you want to cover. And sometimes if there's very stubborn acne, I like to go in a little bit of like an olive green to cut down the red first. When it gets to the forehead, I really don't like to use a lot of foundation on the forehead. In fact, I barely use any right around the hairline, because naturally the complexion should be like a slightly darker there because the sun hits there. And then also we're going to be using, bronzers and sculpting products. So I feel like just the less layers that you put around the hairline, the better. So, you see how much foundation I use? I barely used it because I'm really stretching it out thin and going in just like really, really thin layers. So now I'm going to go into the neck now, but I'm going to use the larger side now because I want to go in with a really softer amount of product. So I'm really just going to put a tiny bit on there and spread it through the bristles of the brush and just get like a really gentle, thin coating of it, just so it matches nicely. But it's important to always hit the parts of the body aside from the face that are showing, because then you'll have this perfect, flawless base and then like red neck or red, shoulders. So it's important to just hit gently the other areas. And then I'll take a beauty blender as well now, a damp beauty blender, and I'll just kind of press a little bit now, and this will kind of grab that top layer of oil, and also it presses the makeup in even nicer. But no, I'm going to save some for later, because I actually do now, this brush that I'm using right now, I'm going to be using this as my blending tool throughout the whole application. So whatever products I use on her complexion, I will always go in right after with this brush with barely any product on it, and that's how I blend all the products into one another. So you want to keep this brush and use it. It's your best tool. I'm going to now should we do concealer now? Okay, so I'm going to go ahead now with the Surreal Skin. And while I'm doing concealer now, it also gives this sort of a chance to melt into her skin and become one. I'm a mixer. I usually like to mix shades. 320. I always use 320 because it has a little bit of pink in it. So I like to mix 320. And I'll go in with 220 and 240. It is 220. This one is 240, slightly deeper. And then my favorite 320. You can see how that has more peach in it. So it's like a little bit more of a correcting shade. I'm going to take a tiny bit of the 320, coat the brush with it. I'm going to go into this lighter shade now and sort of blend the two. But so far I've mixed two. That's just a backup in case I need it. So I'm just a mixer. Like it's weird for me to not mix product. I've always mixed because I like to create my own shade on the spot. Technically I could probably find her exact shade, but again, I just like to kind of mix and create my own. A little bit of peach, a little bit of yellow mixed together gives you a nice neutral. So we are going in with, again, very light, thin layer and building if necessary. But you don't want to go in with a very thick layer. This concealer is actually quite pigmented, but the key is just to not use a lot of it. And then if you're going for very natural makeup too, it's self-setting. So this will sort of dry and self-set so that it doesn't stay oily. If you're using more, you definitely want to still powder it. I do. But the key is to use it very thin. This under eye area, and then blending it into the foundation. And I'm definitely pulling here, sort of enhancing that shape I did earlier. But we are going to smoke a little bit on the bottom later. So the other thing I forgot to mention is that you don't want to go with any thick concealer by the lashes, because you want to allow yourself the room to spread it. And then if you're going to be smoking the bottom lid, you want to definitely consider that as well as you're applying concealer, because you don't need to put a lot of concealer that's right near the eye. So I'm just blending now. This brush, by the way, is amazing if you don't have it, the EF1, just for anything, complexion, concealer. It's really great to apply and then blend with this side. Also, if you notice here, I'm not going with a thick line on the corner because I don't want to have like a white line. I just want to blend that in. Right now it appears a little bit white, but I'm going to be blending it and softening it so it doesn't look too white, just so it looks more natural towards the end. You guys remember back in the day when I used to do the really white concealer, thick? I know you loved it. I did too. The makeup that I do tends to last like a long time because we're building it in these light layers, and that's definitely like an essential part of, doing celebrity makeup is that, they definitely want it to last. So I'm going to take now same combination of the concealer, and I'm going to just pop just a little bit here and let that sit before I blend it in so it grips nice. And then just a tiny bit here on the bridge. I'm going to take now a clean eyeshadow brush, the E3 again. I'm just going to buff underneath here to soften that line so it looks more natural. So I'm taking now our foundation brush from earlier, and we're just going to buff around the edges of everywhere that I applied concealer. Now this will melt the concealer and the foundation together and sort of soften any of the lines between the two. I usually won't put extra product unless I need to. Like, I'll typically now use this with that amount of product on it because it's very evenly coated, and then I'll just use that as a blending tool throughout the process. Okay, so I think I'm going to start to set, because before I do any sculpting or bronzer or sculpting products, I like to powder first. We're going to do loose powder now. I'm going to start with a brush, and then I'll use a puff as well to press in. I'm going to start with the Neutral Light, which is shade number 2, Neutral Light in the Soft Blur Setting Powder. This is the F3 brush. So I'm going to just do first a sort of light dusting before I press anything. I can't really work without powder, unless it's like a shoot or something where, the look is like super dewy. But yeah, I just think powder is what makes the makeup last really long. For under the eyes, I'm going to flip the brush and use the smaller side, and I'm going to use the shade number 1, which is the Fair Pink. This one's going to just give it a tiny bit of brightening and setting.